Alright guys, for today's video I'm going to be attempting to compile the most underrated players in the Championship into a cohesive starting 11. That's the challenge of today's video and I want you guys to get involved with this in the comments down below. Be interested to know who would you regard as your most underrated player at your club, not particularly with your fan base, but in the wider Championship audience. And that's what I'm going to be taking into consideration for today's video. So a fan base may rate this player, but I think they're generally quite underrated amongst general Championship fans. I've gone ahead and compiled my team into a starting 11, and without any further ado, let's jump into it. Starting out in goal, I'm going to go for Rotherham's Victor Johansson. Now I would suggest that perhaps he's now becoming fairly rated. I think general Championship viewers now realise just how good and crucial he actually is to this Rotherham side, but the reason I'd still suggest he's quite underrated is because I really thought of him quite highly in Rotherham's last relegation season from the Championship, and no Championship clubs seemed to come in for him in that League One season. I think he's only gone on and got better from that point, made more saves than any other Championship goalkeeper this season. The fact that Rotherham regularly face an XG over 2 goals each match, and he's the guy who's keeping the scoreline down, and I'd suggest if it wasn't for him they'd be in the relegation zone right now. I rate him that highly and he's going in as my goalkeeper in the underrated 11. Coming in at right back, I'm going to go for Callum Brittain in at Blackburn. He had that injury offset which kept him out for a couple of months, and I think that people have maybe forgot just how good this guy actually is. It was a great deal that Blackburn picked him up for, signing him from Barnsley. He's versatile enough to play in an array of different positions, happy to play at right back, left back, or even further forward into midfield, and I think that over these last few performances for Rovers especially, he's really shown how competitive and how good of a player he actually is, and when fully fit, I'd say, he's up there, top 5 right backs in the league. I really think he's that good. First of my centre halves, I'm going to go Perry Ng at Cardiff. Really rate him ever since Cardiff picked him up. Obviously, they've got one of the stronger defensive records in the Championship this season, despite being down there in the midst of the relegation battle at the moment. But I really rate how he's going to head and adapt to this game. Originally brought in as a right back, can also play a bit further forward as a wing back, but more recently has been tried out as a centre half, and I think he's done really well in that position, considering how, I suppose, diminutive he is for that sort of position. I think his technical skills and speed make up for any weaknesses aerially or anything like that, and partnered alongside someone like Kit Ray, I think Ng, really solid option for Cardiff, and dare I say it, a little bit underrated by a few Championship fans. Also can score a cracking free kick as well. As my centre half to partner him, I'm going to go Andy Hughes. I feel like consistently over the last sort of 3.5 years at North End, Andy Hughes has been Preston's most consistent performer, and I never really hear any hype about him apart from coming out of the Preston North End fan base. For me, he should have been in and around the Welsh squad for the World Cup, but he's not got a sniff there. I think that goes to show how underrated he's actually been. Since he's transitioned from a left back into a left-sided centre half, I think that's just going to head and really elevated his game. Out of our 3 defenders, I think he's probably the most streetwise, definitely the best on the ball, and has the most recovery pace as well, and has always flown under the radar a little bit for me by the general Championship fan. In at left back, I'm going to go for Callum Styles. Massive shame about the injury news that's going to keep him out for the next sort of 3 months in the Championship, I think due to a quad injury. But Styles is an interesting one. He got loads of hype during that season when Barnsley went ahead and made the Championship playoffs, one of their best seasons that year. The next year when they were relegated, I think his stock dropped quite considerably. Obviously he was moved about quite a bit that year. Can play on the left as a left back, left-sided midfielder, or a little bit more centrally in midfield as well. And by the time that Barnsley were relegated, there weren't actually that many clubs seemingly interested in Styles, where I thought there'd be maybe a little bit of a bidding war in there. Styles didn't seem too keen on sticking around at Barnsley, so eventually Millwall picked him up on a loan deal, and whenever I've seen him play for Millwall this season, particularly at the Den, I think he's been a really, really good option for them on that left-hand side. And like I said, it's a massive shame about the injury news. On the right-hand side, and I can't believe I'm actually saying this, but I'm going to go for Tom Ince. Ince has had such a weird career where he's fluctuated between over and underrated that it's quite hard to keep up with what the general perception around him actually is. I think when Stoke picked him up for the sort of money they paid for him, the contract he was on, and the general performances they got out of him around that time, vastly overrated player, and I would have said, you know, similar sort of things at the time. But I think because of how much his stock actually fell off at Stoke, we're now at a point where he's playing at Reading and absolutely smashing it, but I actually think he's a little bit underrated these days. Been such a lively outlet for Paul Ince's side this season. 9 goals, 4 assists in the Championship. Can play in a variety of roles. We've seen him on that right hand side playing as a centre forward, a number 10, a little bit further back into midfield, as well as a holding midfielder. He's glued a lot together for Reading this season in terms of the creativity from that squad, and at 31 years old, dare I say it, I think at this stage of his career he is a little bit underrated these days, which is mental. Coming into central midfield, I'm going to go Ben Sheaf, someone who's continually got better for me. There were a few question marks over him, I think, during that first loan spell he had with Coventry. Eventually they picked him up on a permanent deal, and I think since that point he's only gone on to get better. Reason I say he's a little bit underrated is because I think when a lot of people look at that Coventry squad, you know, particularly into midfield, the sexy name and the more maybe sexy player in terms of the way he goes about doing things is Gustavo Hamer. You know, he's the one who gets all the hype in that midfield, and you know, I'm guilty of doing this on the Championship roundup and things like that. He will always be the go-to player to go ahead and analyse after a match, but Sheaf does a lot of the work off the ball. He's made more tackles than any other player in the Championship this season, I think 90 already by the point I'm recording this one. He plugs a lot of the gaps well, and all the sort of stuff that maybe goes a little bit unnoticed when you are paying a little bit more attention to someone like Hamer. But Sheaf this season getting more recognition that he deserves, but I'd still say a little bit underrated. Next to him in central midfield, I'm going Jason Malumbi, once again, and quite similar to Sheaf. He's not the sexy name in the middle for West Brom. You know, we all know how good Okay Cashflow is, you know, done it in the Premier League for the Baggies, and this season been absolutely fantastic. But in terms of more facilitating play in midfield, I think Malumbi's been so important to how, especially Corberan's good about setting up this West Brom squad. When we think about how they go ahead and really try and suffocate teams in the first 30 or so minutes of matches, Malumbi's going ahead and setting the tempo of that press in midfield, winning loads of second balls, absolutely outstanding work rate off the ball, and also chips in with a fair few goal contributions as well, 6 already this season with a couple of goals and 4 assists. I think you know, my team Preston were certainly guilty of not fully utilising him when we had him on loan. Massively missed opportunity for me, because I think he's an absolutely cracking player, and I think that West Brom fans are starting to notice that now. But I believe signed for about 900k or something like that, massively underrated for me, and I think in the general scope of Championship midfielders, I'd say he flies under the radar. Left midfield, now hear me out for this one, but Onil Hernandez, and maybe not even just by general Championship fans, I actually think he's a little bit underrated by the Norwich City fan base in general. Whenever I've watched Norwich this season, I think they're a much better functioning side with Hernandez in the starting 11, and I think the stats go ahead and back that up. Norwich's record this season with and without Hernandez starting, the majority of his appearances this season have come from the bench. 11 starts, 20 appearances from the bench. But you know, Hernandez, one of those players who has been involved in those previous promotion squads, but I still think he's got a massive role to offer. 2 goals, 3 assists this season is by no means mind-blowing, but I think he contributes in ways that doesn't always mean he's getting on the score sheet or getting an assist. I go back to that Norwich performance away at Preston, for example. Hernandez was absolutely unplayable, and yet he didn't get a goal or an assist in that one. But I think the way he goes about facilitating others, the way he is different to every other wide player that Norwich have in their squad, and the fact that he is one of the best dribblers in the Championship, you know, going off the per 90 numbers, he has been one of the most productive people for that, as well as carries into the box. Since Wagner's come in, I think his end product has been a lot more consistent, which adds to this argument maybe. But just in terms of the play himself, I was racking my brains for who to put on this left midfield spot, and I actually think that Hernandez does fly under the radar a little bit, maybe because his past reputation goes before him perhaps, but I just love a bit of Onil Hernandez, I can't lie. In my first striker role, I'm going to go for Marcus Forss. He's been playing a slightly different role than De Carrick has played, a few matches up front this season, but a lot more action sort of out on that right hand side, which has been interesting. I think since Carrick has been in at Middlesbrough especially, we've seen such an upturn in the performances of Forss. He's a really hard worker, get loads of endeavour off the ball, but we're seeing much more quality on the ball now, whereas previously under under Wilder, even thinking back to that loan spell he had at Hull last season. He just looked a little bit lost. I think he was so well rated while he was at Brentford, but while being at any other championship club, hadn't shown anywhere near to those sort of levels. But I think we're getting that from him now at Middlesbrough, and I think that because his stock had fallen off a little bit, we're now at a point where he is a little bit underrated, because I think when a lot of people look into that Middlesbrough squad, and rightly so, you know, Akpom's receiving all the plaudits at the moment, you know, since Archer's coming in recently, he's had a hot streak of scoring, but 7 goals, 4 assists, but it's not just the numbers which do force justice, it's the overall package that comes with him. Still only 23 years old as well, and like I said, since Carrick's been in there especially, I think we're at the point now where Force is a little bit underrated, dare I say. Last player up, I am going to go Carlton Morris. I feel like with Morris we are getting towards a stage now where he's becoming more fairly rated for the level he's actually at, and people are actually saying, wow, what a bargain Luton actually picked up in the summer. But the fact that they were able to get that deal done for the money they did in the end, the fact that no other massive championship clubs seemed to be in the market for him after how well he'd done with Barnsley in that second half of the season, I think was really surprising to me. But in terms of an overall complete forward, Morris is right up there with the best in the business in this division right now for me. 13 goals, 5 assists as of recording. The variety of goals I think is what makes Morris so underrated and so complete as a forward. If you want a goal, left foot, right foot, inside, outside the box, a header, the catalogue of goals since he's been at Luton has been absolutely fantastic. A good provider along with that as well. He's strong, fast, able to carry the ball, and I struggle to pinpoint a major weakness with him, if I'm honest. When he's, you know, properly on it and in the game, very hard to stop, and like I said, up there with some of the best forwards in the league for me. But guys, there we have it. That is my championship underrated 11 in my opinion. Now, of course, this one's all on personal preference, you know, are any of these players actually underrated? I suppose that depends on you guys with how highly the general championship fan base goes ahead and views these players. But from what I've seen, the talk online, speaking to you guys, watching the games and things like that, those are 11 names that I'd put forward personally for my underrated 11. I'd love to get you guys involved with this one down below. Who would you personally put forward, both from your club and other clubs who you think are a little bit underrated? Leave your 11s down below. Apart from that though, that will wrap it up for today's video. If you did come to enjoy, make sure to leave a like. Apart from that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.